Hello, welcome back to Elise Reads and Speaks. Today I am bringing you part 2 of my March wrap-up. I had done a mid-March wrap-up because I could see how much I was reading and I knew it was going to be a lot. And man, I blew my PR out of the water this month. I read 23 books in March. 23. I'm not even gonna try to top that. Like 23 is a lot of books for just one single month. Okay, so I'm just gonna pick up from where I left off with my mid-month wrap-up. After I read Downworld and gave that one star, I went on to a series by Darynda Jones, okay? There's Death and the Girl Next Door, there's Death, Doom, and Detention, and then there's Death and the Girl He Loves. It's as cheesy as it sounds. I listened to all these audiobooks while I was out going for walks and runs and stuff, and it just kind of like hit the YA paranormal itch that I needed to scratch. I gave them 3 stars. I know, it's like, why did you keep going on with the series if they were just 3 stars? But I don't know, they were just so easy to consume, you know? Like they were easy to listen to. I was into the story. Even though I wasn't in love with it, I just wanted to hear about Death and the Girl He Loves, all right? So like a quick little premise of this is that, you know, this girl, not like other girls, lives in this town. She's supposed to die. She gets, you know, hit by a car. Doesn't this sound familiar? Twilight? She's having the car come at her and she gets saved by a mysterious being who ends up being an angel of death. That kind of story. Sounds up my alley. I mean, it was a good time. 3 stars. Then I read an e-arc that I had from NetGalley. This one is Wild Women and the Blues by Denny S. Bryce, and I give this one 5 stars. Oh man, I was so into it. I think part of the reason that I was just so into it is that the dual timelines, like one is told modern day time, one is 1925 in Chicago, and I really just like felt it. I felt the 20s in Chicago, and just the character work was so good, and the fact that each time that I was in that timeline, I really felt like I was there living it with Honore. It was so good. It was so good. Like, I also don't want to spoil anything. Okay, so this story is that this guy that's a film student wants to do a presentation on this big film director that was in the 1920s. So I believe his name was Oscar Michaud. And he finds a direct line to somebody that worked with him that's still alive. So Honore is in a nursing home, I believe it is, and she's 101 years old at the time that he is doing his project. So he decides that he's going to interview her and trying to get some information about this filmmaker. It doesn't end up being about the filmmaker at all. It's about Honore's story that she finally gets to tell out loud. And it's just so captivating. It's so good. It's got like mobsters in 1920. And it also deals with like, not so much the casting couch for women in entertainment at that time, but how they were treated, like how they were seen as objects and things to be traded around to further the men's aspirations. Like it was a good story. I felt like this was almost Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo vibes with like 1920s Chicago mobsters. So good, so good. Then I read another arc that I got from NetGalley. This one is Duchess If You Dare by Anabelle Bryant. This was a middle of the road for me. It was 3 stars. I don't remember much about it. Like I remember the general plot that in this Victorian Regency era, this girl and this guy meet at a brothel. Okay, they're both not there for the brothel itself. They're trying to solve this like string of assaults or murders. Like something is happening to the women that are downtrodden in society, and they're trying to like put the pieces together of what exactly is going on. And then you know what happens. It's a romance, so they fall in love while they're trying to solve this mystery together. I mean, it was fine. It's not something that's particularly memorable since I don't remember a lot, but I didn't hate it and I didn't dislike it. I mean, it was fine. It was fine. 3 stars. But then I went on to a 1-star book. This 1 star goes to Hemlock by Rue Volley. Let me tell you the premise of this because it sounds super awesome, which is why I was so freaking pissed off when I got to the end. Okay, so this girl finds out that she has the powers of necromancy, okay? She finds out in the very beginning of the book when she makes her cat that died come back to life. Like it started off with a bang that I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. And the cat even goes with her to this boarding school, like, and he's like kind of mangy and whatnot because, you know, he was brought back from the dead. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So this boarding school is a boarding school for necromancers of all different kinds. Like they're not just humans. Like there are different paranormal people in this, all right? Like vampires, werewolves, fairies, like all different kinds, okay? It didn't focus on any one. She just happens to be a human that is a necromancer, and they're trying to figure out like where that necromancy blood came from. Like who is she a direct descendant of? Like it sounds so cool. No, it was not. It was not cool. It was not fun, and I just kept getting more and more angry because here you are with this interesting plot line and you're choosing to focus on the insta-love. And it's not so much the insta-love, it was like the really like middle school, high school cattiness of it all. Like she was gonna dress really good and look really hot to make him jealous and make him want her. And I mean, so much of the book focused on this. And I was like, you have necromancy and you're focusing on wearing hot clothes to make a boy jealous. I was just getting so angry. Oh, and his name. Okay, so I told you that I had an arc of this book. So a lot of times when you have an E-arc, there's a lot of typos and I glaze over them. I mean, they're arcs, you know, that's what they're there for. So I kept seeing this guy's name as like G something else. I forget his last name, but it was like I know, G Gianni. So I was seeing G space Gianni, and I just kind of thought that was a typo. Like anytime that they wrote Gianni, there was just a G before the Gianni. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. It wasn't till like 75% through the book that no, that's what people called him, Gianni, because it was a big deal that he finally told her his first name, his real first name, and nobody else in the school knew his whole first name. So here I am thinking for the whole book that I'm reading a typo of G Gianni. No, like the G actually stands for something other than Gianni. It was so freaking stupid. And I was just so angry when I got to the end of it that I gave it 1 star. I feel like this is definitely going to be one of my top worst reads of the year. Then I went on to The White Rose by Amy Ewing. This is the second book in the Lone City series. The first one is The Jewel, and I really enjoyed this one. I read this one years ago, did not remember basically anything about it, but I was totally into it again. This is that series where the people that live on the outskirts of society, so not in the Jewel, they live on the furthermost tier of the marsh, they kind of have these magical powers that the Jewel takes these girls and brings them into the center city to act as surrogates because the people in the Jewel can't have their own children. All right, I know, it sounds bizarre. I'm not gonna tell you a lot of what goes on in the second book because, you know, spoilers, but just know that second time around, I still really like this series. Then I listened to the audiobook of Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado. I really enjoy this one. This is the second book that I read this year, actually, second book that I read in March with Fat Rep. And I just really enjoy that perspective. Like, I feel like I get a lot out of it. And there were really some times in this book where I felt like my heart was being wrenched out because it just felt very raw, very open. Like, oh, I gave it 4 stars, and I'll explain why I didn't give it 5 stars. But first, let me explain what I really liked. The stuff that she was raw and open with, like she has a relationship with her mother that's very, very tense because her mother used to be overweight, then lost all this weight, and her life kind of focuses on the weight that she's lost, and she's always telling Charlie to eat better or exercise more, or, you know, you're kind of choosing to live this life. That's why you're this big. And it's as toxic as it sounds. Like, oh, there were parts in there that they were going at each other. Well, really, it was her mother going at her, and I felt like I felt Charlie's heart breaking, you know? And she just kind of goes through high school, and she has a very attractive best friend, and people are trying to use her to get closer to her friends so that maybe they have a chance with her. Like, oh, just so many parts in this. It was like, oh God, I feel awful. I feel awful. But at the same time, it was very empowering for this type of representation because she was fully aware of the choices that she was making and the life that she wanted to live. There's a part that I loved in there that she was just talking about, you know, I tried the diet thing and it's just not for me. I don't like it. I kind of see food as a celebration and I like to eat when I'm happy and share those moments with other people, and it just represents happiness for me. So no, I don't want to give that up. And I really enjoy that. Like, I just felt like that was a very positive way to look at things. And I also felt very seen by this book. So not so much the representation, but Charlie is a Puerto Rican girl, and she's often kind of looked down on for being Puerto Rican or not being full Puerto Rican because she doesn't speak the Spanish language. Like, people will go up to her and start speaking in Spanish and expect her to understand, and she doesn't, and then they kind of give her a look like, okay, but aren't you Puerto Rican? Dude, my life. That's my life right here. I mean, when people see my last name, I mean, Rodriguez is pretty much Smith in Hispanic, okay? So they see my last name and they just start speaking Spanish, and I'm like, I know some, definitely not conversational. I know like basic, but at the same time, I could just feel it. I could feel it when Charlie was like, oh, and then they give me that look. I'm like, oh, I know that look. I know exactly what look you're talking about. I felt seen by that part. Okay, so let me explain, since I loved it so much, why I didn't give it 5 stars. I felt that the story was just too long. Like, I felt 75% through that the book should have been finished. And that last quarter of the book, I felt like was dragging, that I was like, okay, this really needs to be done by now. Like, I felt like we already closed the book and yet it's still going on. So I just felt like, you know, if I was feeling that strongly, that I really couldn't give it 5 stars. But I just want you to know that I really loved this book. It took me by surprise. I was totally into it. It's a great book. Then I read another arc that I had. This was Hello, Cruel Heart by Maureen Johnson. So this was like the villain origin story for Cruella de Vil. And unfortunately, I only gave it 3 stars. It was just middle of the road. There were some things that were good in here, but some things that just didn't pull me in. I did already talk about this book when I was talking about the April arcs that I have for release, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it. Just know that it was middle of the road for me. If you like Cruella de Vil, you might wanna pick this one up, but it could go either way. Then I listened to The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, and this is another book that I gave 3 stars. Again, wasn't bad, wasn't great, and I just left off feeling, okay. And I also felt like this was another book that had such an interesting premise, and it was just kind of boring at times, or it dragged on at times. Like, here you have multiple timelines, and we're finding out about this apothecary from a long time ago who devised these potions for women to give to men to, like, off them, all right? Like, doesn't that sound great? Like, these women banding together a long time ago to get rid of the men that are treating them really poorly. I like that idea. And the present timeline was somebody that was on a trip and found this bottle that traced back to this person. So she's doing research because it just like took her by surprise. And the timelines actually seem to complement each other, because as you're finding out about this group that went against the men, this person in the modern timeline, she's really being treated badly by her husband. You know, he cheats on her, and she had gone to this other place to get away from him and to just clear her head. So the timelines, I will say, did have a nice complementing factor, all right? Like, I like that she's hearing about some strong women while she really needs those strong women in her corner. That was cool. It was just like dragging on, like, and there are parts that I didn't care about. There were 3 different perspectives in this, and I think that they could have took one out completely, didn't even make her a character in the book, and I would have liked the book a lot more. Like, I don't even see why that perspective was needed. I don't know. I was disappointed by it. I didn't dislike it, so I'm not gonna give it 2 stars. I was disappointed, didn't love it, 3 stars. And the last book that I read in the month of March was Go the Distance by Jen Calonita. This was the twisted tale of Hercules. I love Hercules, and it focuses on Meg. And man, I was into this. I gave it 4 stars. I felt like this story gave Meg the story that she deserved. Meg is one of my favorite characters from Disney, like all of Disney. And I will say, on Disney Plus, you're now able to choose an avatar for your profile on Disney Plus. And I was clicking through for Meg, and she's not there. She is not there as an option. And I was like, see, this is why this story is needed. Meg does not get the love that she deserves, all right? It's so good, it's so good. So if you don't remember from my April Arcs video, this focuses on Meg having to go through a quest to become a god. The quest that she is given is that she has to rescue her ex's wife from the underworld. And this is the same ex that we heard about in Hercules, that once she sacrificed herself for him, he found somebody else and moved on and didn't give Meg a second thought. So this was a great book. I'm not gonna ruin anything for you by even talking about it, because you know the bulk of the story from Hercules. It's a twisted tale. It is a twisted tale that I am just going to accept as canon because I liked it that much. All right, so those are the 11 books that I read in the second half of the month. I will do a nice little montage here of the 12 books that I read at the beginning of the month. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you for tuning in to Elise Reads and Speaks, and I will catch you next time, guys. Bye!